2 years ago, Cristiano Ronaldo shocked the world by moving to Saudi Arabia. Everyone called it a retirement move, a cash grab, the end of his legacy. But what if I told you that Ronaldo's transfer was just the opening move in the most dangerous game football has ever seen? And what's even crazier, it's actually working.
The world's greatest footballer, Cristiano Ronaldo, as another player here at Marsoon Park, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
Because right now, while you're watching this video, Saudi Arabia is quietly dismantling European football from the inside out. They've spent over 1 billion euros on players in the last 2 years. They've convinced Darwin Núñez, Theo Hernandez, and dozens of other stars to abandon their prime years for the desert. And the scary part, this isn't about building a competitive league. It never was. This is about something much bigger, much darker, and way more calculated than anyone wants to admit. And European football is sleepwalking straight into the trap. See, when Ronaldo signed for Al Nassr in January 2023, everyone laughed. He's finished, they said. He's just chasing one last payday. But here's what nobody noticed. That same month, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, which controls over $700 billion, took control of 4 major clubs: Al Nassr, Al Hilal, Al Ittihad, and Al Ahly. And suddenly, money started flowing like oil. Within 6 months, they'd signed Benzema, Neymar, Kanté, Mahrez, Firmino, Henderson, and about 30 other players you'd recognize. The total spend, over 800 million euros in one summer. That's more than the entire Bundesliga spent, more than Serie A, more than La Liga. And they did it without breaking a sweat. But here's where it gets interesting. Because if you actually look at what's happening in Saudi Arabia right now, the whole thing makes absolutely no sense. The stadiums are empty. Like, genuinely empty. Al Ittihad, who have Benzema and won the league last season, averaged 34,000 fans per game. That sounds decent until you realize their stadium holds 62,000. Some matches have had fewer than 400 people in attendance. 400, you'd get more people at a Sunday league game in England. The TV ratings are even worse. In March 2025, Al Hilal played Al Ittihad. That's Neymar's team versus Benzema's team, the biggest rivalry in Saudi football. You know how many people tuned in to watch? 5,000. Not 5 million, 5,000. That's less than a League 2 match gets on a Tuesday night. So if nobody's watching, nobody's attending, and the league is hemorrhaging money, why are they still spending? Why did they just drop 53 million on Darwin Núñez? Why did they pay 68 million for Matteo Retegui, a striker most people have barely heard of? It doesn't make financial sense, unless it's not about football at all. Let me paint you a picture. Saudi Arabia has a massive problem. Their entire economy is built on oil, and the world is slowly moving away from oil. Electric cars, renewable energy, climate change policies, it's all pointing in one direction, away from fossil fuels, which means Saudi Arabia needs to diversify, and fast. Enter Vision 2030. Vision 2030 is Saudi Arabia's plan to transform their economy and their global image. And sport, specifically football, is the centerpiece. They're not trying to build a competitive league. They're trying to buy legitimacy. They're trying to make you forget about the human rights violations, the executions, the treatment of women, the migrant workers dying in construction projects. They're trying to sportswash their reputation on a scale we've never seen before. And it's working, because every time Ronaldo scores a goal, every time Benzema lifts a trophy, every time a European star posts a picture from Riyadh, they're doing Saudi Arabia's PR work for them. They're normalizing a regime that Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch have repeatedly condemned, and most fans don't even realize it's happening. But the really dark part, European football is helping them do it. UEFA, FIFA, the Premier League, La Liga, they're all complicit, because Saudi money isn't just flowing into the Saudi Pro League, it's flowing everywhere. Saudi Arabia is now a major sponsor of FIFA. They're hosting the 2034 World Cup.
The host of the FIFA World Cup 2034 will be Saudi Arabia.
They've invested in European clubs through shell companies and private equity firms. They're buying up broadcasting rights, sponsorship deals, even youth academies. And here's the thing that should terrify every football fan. Once Saudi Arabia controls enough of the infrastructure, they can start making demands. They can influence transfer policies. They can dictate fixture schedules. They can even threaten to pull funding if leagues don't cooperate. We've already seen it happen with the Super League proposal. We've seen it with FIFA's expanded Club World Cup. This is just the beginning. Now I know what you're thinking. But surely the players know what they're doing, right? Surely they understand the implications. And honestly, I don't think they care, because the money is just too good. Ronaldo is reportedly earning 200 million euros a year. Neymar signed a deal worth 300 million over 2 years. Benzema is on 100 million annually. These aren't just big contracts. These are generational wealth contracts, the kind of money that sets up your great-grandchildren. And you can't really blame them, can you? If someone offered you 10 times your current salary to do the exact same job in a different location, you'd at least think about it. The problem is, these players have platforms. They have influence. And by taking Saudi money, they're legitimizing a regime that most human rights organizations consider deeply problematic. But let's talk about what's really happening on the pitch, because that's where the cracks are starting to show. Despite spending over €1 billion, the Saudi Pro League is still kind of rubbish. The quality of football is nowhere near Europe's top 5 leagues. The defending is championship level at best, the tactics are basic, and most of the star players look like they're playing at 70% intensity. Ronaldo is still scoring goals, sure. He's got 104 goals in 117 games for Al Nassr, which sounds impressive until you realize he's playing against defenders who wouldn't make it into a League One team. Benzema won the league with Al Ittihad last season, but hasn't scored yet this campaign. And Neymar, he's been injured more than he's been fit, which is pretty much his entire career summarized. The league average attendance is under 10,000 per match. That's lower than the Indian Super League, lower than Australia's A-League, lower than the MLS, and these are clubs that are supposedly competing with Europe's elite. It's a joke, a very expensive joke. And now, here's where I need you to do something. If you're watching this and you think European football should be worried about Saudi Arabia's influence, drop a comment below and let me know why. Because the next part of this story is where things get really concerning. See, Saudi Arabia isn't just buying players anymore, they're buying the future. In the summer of 2025, they signed players like Enzo Milot from Stuttgart, Valentin Atangana from Reims, and Christopher Bonsuba from Genk. These aren't retirement signings. These are players in their early 20s who should be entering their prime years in Europe. And Saudi Arabia is convincing them to throw that away for money. Think about what that means. In 5 years, we could have an entire generation of players who chose Saudi Arabia over Europe. Players who never fulfilled their potential because they took the easy money. And once that becomes normalized, once it becomes acceptable for 23-year-olds to move to Saudi Arabia, European football is finished. Because why would any young player stay in Europe for $100,000 a week when they could earn $1 million a week in Saudi? The transfer of Darwin Núñez is the perfect example. He's 26 years old. He should be in his absolute prime. Instead, Liverpool sold him to Al Hilal for €53 million, and he's now earning more in a month than most people earn in a lifetime. And the scary thing, more players are going to follow, because once the floodgates open, they don't close. But here's what European football doesn't want to admit. They created this problem. For decades, football has been about money. Billionaire owners, state-backed clubs, obscene transfer fees, players earning $500,000 a week. Football sold its soul to capitalism a long time ago. Saudi Arabia is just playing the same game, but with deeper pockets. And the hypocrisy is staggering. When Manchester City, owned by Abu Dhabi, spends $100 million on Jack Grealish, nobody bats an eye. When PSG, owned by Qatar, pays $222 million for Neymar, it's just business. But when Saudi Arabia does the exact same thing, suddenly everyone's concerned about sportswashing and human rights. Where was that energy when Qatar hosted the World Cup? Where was that energy when the UAE started buying up European clubs? The truth is, European football only cares about morality when it affects their bottom line. And right now, Saudi Arabia is a direct threat to their revenue. That's what this is really about. Not human rights, not the integrity of the game, money, but let's talk about the financial sustainability of all this, because it's genuinely insane. In July 2025, the Saudi Ministry of Sports had to step in and create a financial oversight committee because the clubs were spending so recklessly. They've implemented budget controls, expense monitoring, and sustainability measures. You know what that means? It means even Saudi Arabia, with all their oil money, can't sustain this level of spending forever. Most Saudi Pro League clubs are operating at massive losses. They're entirely reliant on state funding. And while Saudi Arabia can afford to bankroll this project for now, there's a limit, especially as oil revenues decline and they need to invest in other sectors. At some point, the money will dry up. And when it does, what happens to all these players on €100 million contracts? Here's my prediction. Within 5 years, the Saudi Pro League will either collapse entirely or pivot to a completely different model. They'll realize that buying aging superstars doesn't actually build a competitive league. They'll realize that empty stadiums and low TV ratings don't generate revenue, and they'll either cut their losses or double down by trying to merge with European competitions. And that's the real endgame. Saudi Arabia doesn't want to compete with Europe. They want to become part of Europe. They want Saudi clubs in the Champions League. They want a seat at UEFA's table. They want to control the narrative, the fixtures, the entire structure of global football. And if they get their way, football as we know it will be unrecognizable. Think about it. Imagine a Champions League where Al Hilal and Al Nasser are competing alongside Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. Imagine a world where Saudi Arabia has voting power in UEFA decisions. Imagine fixture schedules being changed to accommodate Ramadan or Saudi national holidays. It sounds far-fetched, but so did a Saudi-funded Super League 3 years ago. And look where we are now. The 2034 World Cup is the perfect example. FIFA awarded it to Saudi Arabia despite massive human rights concerns, despite questions about infrastructure, despite the fact that summer temperatures in Saudi Arabia can reach 50 degrees Celsius. Why? Because Saudi Arabia paid for it. They bought the World Cup, just like they're trying to buy football. And European clubs are complicit. They're selling their players to Saudi Arabia for inflated fees. They're accepting Saudi sponsorship deals. They're playing in Saudi-hosted preseason tournaments. They're normalizing the relationship because it's profitable. And in doing so, they're handing over control of the sport. But here's what gives me hope. Fans are starting to notice. When Newcastle United, owned by Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, tried to sign players, their own fans protested. When Henderson moved to Saudi Arabia, Liverpool fans burned his shirt. When Benzema and Kanté signed, French fans called them mercenaries. The backlash is real, and it's growing because at the end of the day, football belongs to the fans, not to billionaires, not to oil states, not to corrupt administrators. And if fans collectively decide that Saudi Arabia's influence is unacceptable, there's nothing the money can do to stop that. We've seen it before with the Super League. Fans killed that project in 48 hours. We can do it again, but it requires awareness. It requires people understanding what's actually happening, because Saudi Arabia is counting on you not paying attention. They're counting on you being distracted by Ronaldo's goals and Neymar's skills. They're counting on you forgetting about the migrant workers, the human rights abuses, the executions, the oppression. They're counting on you choosing entertainment over ethics. And that's the dark truth that European football isn't noticing. Or maybe they are noticing and they just don't care. Because as long as the money keeps flowing, as long as the transfer fees keep inflating, as long as the sponsorship deals keep coming, they're happy to look the other way. So what's the solution? Honestly, I don't know if there is one. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. Saudi Arabia is here to stay. They've invested too much, gained too much influence, bought too many allies. The best we can hope for is transparency, regulations, fan pressure, making sure that every time a player moves to Saudi Arabia, every time a club accepts Saudi money, we ask the difficult questions, because football is more than just a game. It's a cultural institution, it's a community, it's something that brings people together across borders, languages, and backgrounds. And if we allow it to be hijacked by a regime that fundamentally opposes those values, then we've lost something irreplaceable. The Saudi Pro League isn't a threat because it's competitive. It's a threat because it's a Trojan horse. It's a way for Saudi Arabia to buy legitimacy, influence, and control over the sport we love. And European football is too greedy, too short-sighted, and too corrupt to stop it. So here's what I want you to do. Share this video. Talk about it with your mates. Make noise. Because the only way we stop this is if enough people care. If enough people say, no, this isn't what football should be. If enough people refuse to accept Saudi Arabia's sportswashing project as the new normal. What do you think? Is Saudi Arabia ruining football, or is this just the natural evolution of the sport? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe if you want more deep dives into the stories that football doesn't want you to know about. Because trust me, this is just the beginning, and it's going to get a lot darker before it gets better.